Ou je peux l'enlever avec ma question tout de suite. Vous réagissez comment, M. Deschênes, au déclenchement de la grève hier après l'annonce du gouvernement sur la réforme des postes?
Bien, on est vraiment déçus du travail du ministre Lightbound parce que son rôle, c'est de concilier des intérêts divergents puis de trouver des solutions. Et là, il agit de façon irresponsable en lançant hier une bombe atomique, alors que le problème est connu puis reconnu par nous également au sein de Poste Canada depuis 2018 qu'il y a des problèmes. La façon de faire, c'est de réconcilier les partis puis de trouver une façon de rendre Poste Canada plus productive. Maintenant, ce qu'il a fait hier, le ministre, c'est d'annoncer en catastrophe, alors que le premier ministre n'est même pas au pays, qu'elle allait transformer en profondeur une institution qui existe depuis plus longtemps que le pays, qui emploie 68 000 employés. Et là, il dit, moi, je décide qu'on transforme. Et alors, non, c'est pas productif. Et s'il veut vraiment transformer la société d'État, il faudrait qu'il travaille avec les gens un peu. Alors, ça, c'est inquiétant. C'est pas une façon de travailler qui fait du sens. Puis, ensuite, bien, ce qu'il a annoncé nous inquiète. Nous, au Bloc québécois, on défend les régions. Les bureaux de poste en zone rurale, j'en ai plein dans mon comté, c'est un service qui est essentiel. C'est un endroit où on se rencontre. Et lorsque le gouvernement nous dit on va moderniser les services, trop souvent, ce que ça veut dire, c'est qu'on va couper en région. Alors ça, c'est inquiétant, puis on va se battre contre ça. Puis l'autre chose qui nous inquiète, c'est la livraison du courrier à domicile. Il y a des gens à mobilité réduite qui ont besoin de ça. Il y a des aînés qui ont besoin de ça. Alors, finalement, c'est une annonce un peu en catastrophe où on nous propose de réduire des services sans consulter la population sur les vrais besoins des gens.
Reconnaissez-vous qu'il y a des changements à apporter? C'est une société qui perd près d'1 milliard par année.
Oui.
Donc, à un moment donné, si on ne fait rien, si on n'essaie pas d'apporter le changement, ça va être la fin là, pour Poste Canada sera plus viable? On
est tout à fait d'accord qu'il y a un enjeu important avec Poste Canada, que le modèle d'affaires est à revoir. On peut quand même mentionner que Poste Canada est actionnaire à 90 % de Purolator, puis que ça, c'est profitable. Alors, il y a encore des besoins. Ce qu'on dit, c'est dans la façon de faire cette transformation-là, il faut consulter les gens, il faut avoir un souci pour les aînés, les personnes à mobilité réduite, pour les bureaux de poste en zone rurale, et surtout, il ne faut pas mettre d'huile sur le feu, parce que ce qu'il a fait vraiment, son geste hier, ça a déclenché une grève générale. Aujourd'hui, il n'y a plus personne qui reçoit son courrier. Il y a des PME partout au Québec qui vont avoir des problèmes à se faire livrer le courrier. Alors, est-ce qu'il a vraiment fait avancer les choses, le ministre Lightbound? Absolument pas. Il y a des moyens de transformer des sociétés d'État. Ça se fait en consultant la population, puis ça se fait en travaillant en partenariat, autant avec les cadres de Poste Canada que les employés.
Lui disait hier que justement, il espérait que son annonce, ces mesures-là, ça serve un peu comme une base pour les deux parties pour avoir une nouvelle relation, pour négocier. C'était de l'utopie, ça, à vos yeux?
Bien, l'effet de l'annonce de M. Lightbound hier, c'est de déclencher une grève générale. Les gens ne reçoivent plus leur courrier. Les PME doivent se dépatouiller pour fonctionner. Et je ne vois pas en quoi ça améliore la situation à Poste Canada, là, vraiment. Là.
Dans votre région, vous en avez parlé un petit peu, mais
oui.
Évidemment, il y a beaucoup de gens qui relèvent de Poste Canada. Êtes-vous préoccupé par la grève
Oui, on l'est en région. Bien, les bureaux de poste en zone rurale sont importants. C'est même des lieux de rencontre. Les gens sont attachés à ce service-là. C'est sûr qu'il y a une numérisation qui se passe, là, puis ça prend une modernisation. Mais il ne faut pas oublier là-dedans les personnes aînées. Il y a des gens qui... on le dit peut-être pas assez, mais il y a encore beaucoup de gens qui vont pas sur Internet, qui n'ont pas la capacité de tout faire ça. Alors, le bureau de poste, c'est un service essentiel. Et je vous le dis, ce qui arrive trop souvent, c'est que dès qu'il y a des coupures à faire, on les fait dans les zones rurales. Et ça, c'est inacceptable. Donc, il y a un service essentiel qui est donné dans les bureaux de poste. Est-ce qu'on peut améliorer l'efficacité de Poste Canada? Est-ce qu'on peut augmenter la productivité de Poste Canada? Absolument. Est-ce qu'on doit revoir le modèle d'affaires? Absolument. Mais pas sur le dos des régions, pas sur le dos des personnes à mobilité réduite, pas sur le dos des aînés et surtout en consultant la population et en ne faisant pas des annonces un peu catastrophes qui viennent finalement jeter de l'huile sur le feu dans un dossier qui a de la misère à avancer depuis trop longtemps.
Merci beaucoup d'avoir
Ça m'a fait plaisir. Bonne journée.
To yesterday's announcement by the government. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's really disturbing that the minister abruptly made the announcement to end door-to-door delivery. We know for sure this will greatly impact rural communities, remote communities, indigenous communities, seniors, people with mobility challenges. Sorry, I just walked up the steps and trying to catch my breath. you know, instead of tearing down Canada Post, my question to the minister is this: why doesn't he build it up? Canada Post used to, once upon a time, do postal banking, as an example. Why don't we build up Canada Post by bringing back postal banking? Why don't we build up Canada Post by utilizing their big footprint with charge stations, and built up that infrastructure for Canadians across the country? Why don't we utilize that footprint to build community hubs, and particularly for rural communities where they can use that hub to have internet access, computer access, and community access? Why don't we utilize the strength of Canada Post to the benefit of the community, and instead of actually tearing it down?
The government says that it's $5 billion in the red. You can't keep bailing it out to the same scale it's been doing, and that seniors and people with mobility issues can apply to still get home delivery, and that they want to protect rural and Indigenous communities having that at-home delivery. So what are you saying in response to them saying, look, we can't keep bailing it out like this?
Well, so they say that they will provide all those services, but already there are Canadians where door-to-door delivery has already ended. So given the limited hours to which it's operating, where people can go pick up their mail, the reality is this: if you work a 9-to-5 job, it is almost impossible for people to get there to pick up their mail. They would actually have to leave work early every week in order to get their mail. That is their reality. One of the reasons why Canada Post is not as competitive as it could be is because the government is limiting their level of service, which is why I say invest in Canada Post and expand their service delivery, and then you can actually be far more competitive in its service. The other thing we have to remember as well, Canada Post is a service that is meant to be universal. And yes, there are communities where you have to deliver the service where it is not going to be a profit-making venture. And you have to remember this: Canada Post exists as a service for Canadians. And is it really meant to be a profit-making venture? But instead of helping them to be more competitive and to ensure that the services are in place for Canadians, to ensure that you respect accessibility and honor that perspective, the government is taking away their ability to do that.
So
and it's the very opposite of what needs to be done.
Would you like to see changes then to Canada Post workers being required to work on weekends and more flexibility on part-time work and that sort of thing?
Well, I'm going to leave that up to the unions to negotiate with the government. But what I'm saying is that what the government should be doing is to give Canada Post a bigger mandate. I mean, why is it that we won't allow for Canada Post to operate as postal banking, provide postal banking services? Is it because it's competitive with the banks, and so the banks would lose their profit? Is that why? And maybe, because we used to actually have postal banking through Canada Post. In remote communities where they don't have banking agencies, that would be a really important service, and it would actually provide a service to Canadians, and they would also make money doing that work. And so we should be thinking about innovative ways. The government talks about innovative ways all the time. Why are they not thinking about innovative ways to revitalize Canada Post? Canada Post is an important institution for Canadians, and they've done a tremendous job over the years. Yes, our reality is changing today, and so the question then becomes, what are they doing? What is the Canadian government doing to help Canada Post adapt to the changing realities?
A number of years ago, the Harper Conservatives tried to do this with Canada Post, and the Liberals were furious about it. And what do you make of the fact that now it's the Liberals doing this very same thing?
Well, one word comes to mind: hypocritical. That's exactly where the Liberals are always at. They say one thing and then they do another. And Canadians should be outraged as well, because if this was being done by the Harper administration or by the Conservatives, people would be screaming up and down the streets. Well, the Liberals are doing it now, and they should be screaming up and down the streets. And so that's why the NDP, we're always advancing alternatives, a better path forward. And so I say, do not tear down Canada Post, let's build them up.
Do you see any possibilities of breakthroughs at the negotiation table, considering the current escalation?
Well, I mean, right now, I don't think the government's being helpful. And per usual, when these disputes come up, they're not being helpful, I don't think. And so I am urging the government to do what is important for Canadians and really support Canada Post in this new environment, in this new era with their service delivery. They have a lot of capacity and a lot of ability to support Canada both economically but also in our community as well. And by the way, one of the service delivery component that will add value to that work is that they can actually do wellness checks as well in communities. So can you imagine if we can just open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of what Canada Post can do, we would actually be great.
So wellness checks for social workers, or what kind of wellness checks do you think postal workers should be doing it for whole communities?
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of seniors, for example, are shut-ins. And having someone just to check on them to see if everything is okay would be a value. You know, you don't want to sort of come back and when they find that somebody's in trouble and left alone for days on end, as an example. That would be a very basic thing that could be done. For example, call for help when that happens, as an example. So there's a variety of things to which we can utilize Canada Post and their capacity and the footprint that they have in Canada. They exist already, so instead of actually dismantling them, support them and give them the mandate and the resources to expand those services. It would be a benefit not only to the workers in Canada Post, but a benefit to our communities from coast to coast to coast.
How does that help the bottom line issue, though? Like with the wellness checks, for instance?
Well, if they're doing a delivery, and that would be actually an additional service already in terms of value added. Other things that they can add to the bottom line, postal banking would be a financial return to that service. Using Canada Post's large footprint with their locations as charging stations, that would be a return to Canada Post on the bottom line. Using getting them into providing services as a community hub with a variety of services, that would be a return to Canada Post in terms of the bottom line. Using them to provide e-commerce services, that would be a return for Canada Post for a profit. There are a number of ways to do it, and I just ask the government to open their hearts and minds to think out of the box, to think what we can do and what is possible, instead of saying, nope, you just have to cut the services, dismantle all of you, and then be done with it. That does not help anyone. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good day. Bonjour tout le monde. Today marks a pivotal moment in our commitment to the Canadian Armed Forces and to the principles of fairness and justice that define our nation. I'm very pleased to be here with my Parliamentary Secretary, Sherry Romanado, who's got extensive experience with this bill and on this file. We're pleased to be here together because just a moment ago I reintroduced a series of legislative changes designed to modernize and strengthen the military justice system. These reforms, which were previously tabled as Bill C-66 and reached second reading before the last Parliament ended, are now advancing under a new framework as Bill C-11. Il est clair que nous devons agir rapidement pour faire avancer ces changements essentiels. On espère que tous les partis appuieront le projet de loi C-11 afin qu'il puisse progresser le plus rapidement possible. Canada's military justice system must not only reflect the values of fairness, accountability, and respect, but it also must uphold the trust Canadians place in the institutions that serve them. Through Bill C-11, we are fulfilling the recommendations of former Supreme Court Justices Arbour and Fish, and we are taking decisive steps to rebuild and to reinforce trust within the Canadian Armed Forces. These legislative changes will include, first, removing the Canadian Armed Forces' jurisdiction over the investigation and prosecution of criminal code sexual offences committed within Canada. Second, establishing stronger, more transparent appointment processes for senior Canadian Armed Forces members who play crucial roles in the military justice system. And third, it will introduce new, enhanced support for victims under the Declaration of Victims' Rights. Ces réformes ne sont pas seulement nécessaires, elles sont cruciales. Elles sont essentielles pour garantir que le système de justice militaire soit équitable, crédible et capable de répondre aux besoins évolutifs de notre population. Above all, these changes will uphold the highest standards of integrity, reinforce operational effectiveness, and honor the immense sacrifices made by those who wear the uniform in service to Canada. Every member of the Canadian Armed Forces must have confidence that incidents of sexual misconduct will be addressed with the seriousness and the transparency and the timeliness they deserve. That complainants will be heard, they will be respected, and they will be supported. This is not just an expectation. It's a fundamental right for every Canadian. La modernisation du système de justice militaire s'inscrit dans notre démarche plus vaste visant à transformer la culture institutionnelle des FAC en une culture inclusive, transparente et responsable. And beyond this bill, we're also introducing a probationary period for new recruits to ensure they embrace the Canadian Armed Forces' core values from day one. Nous avons également clarifié des définitions clés, notamment en ce qui concerne les comportements sexuels inappropriés, les conduites haineuses et d'autres formes de préjudice, afin qu'ils puissent être clairement identifiés et traités rapidement. While we've made significant progress, we recognize that the work is far from over. We will continue to take every necessary step to ensure our people are safe, they're supported, and they're empowered to carry out the vital missions we entrust to them. The women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces deserve nothing less than our absolute commitment to their safety and well-being. Thank you. Merci. I'm now happy and prepared to take your questions.
Minister,
We will now take questions from journalists. One question, one follow-up. Please state your name and outfit.
Minister, the first iteration of this bill was met with critics who suggested that it did not go far enough. So I'm led to believe that there are no changes to this legislation. So can you answer that if you're just simply reintroducing the same bill that was before Parliament before?
Yeah. I believe when it comes to parliamentary legislative processes, you never break up a winning combination. And Bill C-66 had all-party support. We intend to build on that base. We intend to cultivate that support. We intend to have it debated openly and widely and transparently at committee. We think this takes us a huge distance down the road to, frankly, implement the only recommendation of 48 by Madam Justice Arbour, recommendation number 5, that actually requires a legislative response. It also takes 8 or 10 recommendations from Mr. Justice Fish to change the way in which we treat the appointments, for example, of senior judicial and regulatory officers. They'll be no longer appointed by the Chief of Defence Staff, for example, but rather appointed by the Governor and Council to do away with any semblance of appearance or real conflict. So this is a very solid floor on which to build. It allows us to act early in this parliamentary session with, we hope, cultivating all-party support to get this recommendation from number 5 from Madam Justice Arbour operationalized.
On a completely different topic, Minister, the Department of National Defence has loaned a company in London, Ontario called Armatech a number of vehicles to refurbish for donation to Ukraine. Can you tell us what's happening with that contract? Because it's been well over a year since the company was asked to do this.
I'm aware of the situation. I'm just not in a position to comment on it. I understand this matter is now the subject of litigation. And if it is, of course, it would be improper, untoward, and inappropriate for me to say anything else.
Litigation in what fashion?
Litigation is litigation. So this is something which is being dealt with by the department and by Armatech as a company itself. So I can't go any further in terms of details, because this is something that's being worked out with both parties.
Suffice to say that Ukraine won't be getting these vehicles.
This matter is now the subject of discussion and litigation between the department and Armortech. I'm not going to prejudge nor comment nor share any details which might have an effect on that process.
The last question. Oh, sorry. What challenges are you hearing from victims of sexual misconduct about going through the process now where cases are transferred to the civilian system? And are you still seeing many cases where the military is still investigating because they're opting to go that way because this isn't law yet?
That's a very good question. As of 2021, on an interim basis, a decision was made to accept and ratify recommendation number 5 without it being formally legislated. Since then, 100% of all cases involving criminal code sexual offences have been treated and dealt with outside of the department by police, through police of local jurisdiction. I think one of the things that's most important to remember here is it's very important for any victim that may be subject to this kind of nefarious and unacceptable and deplorable behavior is to remember that they have to be able to trust the system. They have to have the support they need. They need to have the confidence that it's transparent, predictable, that they have the support that they need to come forward and to reveal what has happened to them. And trust is a big part of what this bill, we think, will actually help build and enhance, not just inside the Canadian Armed Forces, but in a Canadian population which is investing heavily in defence. And so we need to make sure that what we see, what we've seen in the past, is dealt with more expeditiously. So trust, expeditious timing, and making sure that that people understand in the system that these are significant, profound changes.
The Defence Procurement Agency, that was announced in April. When could we see that move forward? And what could it look like? Could there be a CEO? What shape could it take?
The purpose of a new approach to defence procurement is to accelerate, to specialize, to build the capacity we need to execute quickly on purchases, and to obviously help the operationalization of new equipment, new systems, new kit, uniforms, parts, etc., to make our forces, of course, as high-performing as they possibly can be. That process is well underway. The design is well underway. Obviously, when this agency is complete, we'll reveal it. We'll explain to folks how it will operate. You can rest assured that it's being informed not only with the experience of procurement inside the federal government, but the demands of those who would deal with the procurement of the federal government outside of government. So we're going to try to streamline and get the best system possible.
How are you going to be able to make sure that the justice system can actually absorb all of these cases? How are you going to make sure it's going to be well equipped enough to do that?
It's an excellent question. We've signed an MOU, for example, with the province of Ontario to begin preparing for more of the cases heading into the civilian jurisdiction. As I said, since 2021, every criminal code sexual offence has been treated on the outside, has been sent on the outside. So we're going to continue to build and negotiate with the police of local jurisdiction, with provincial authorities, the OPP, Sûreté du Québec, for example, and we will impress upon them the need to be able to help us in this regard. And I think so far the progress has been quite encouraging, certainly with Ontario, and I think we can use Ontario as a wonderful demonstration project for the rest of the country.
And on another matter, Pete Hegseth has summoned the world's military generals to Virginia. Are you or are General Carignan or any of the other Canadian top military officials going to be attending?
I'm not planning to attend. I met with Secretary Hegseth on Monday. We had a very productive exchange on a series of different files. Obviously, foundational questions like the border, like military procurement, like the Arctic, like NORAD, like our NATO responsibilities, what's happening in the theater in Ukraine. So we had a wide-ranging and productive exchange, and there's certainly more cooperation between us than meets the eye. I'm not familiar with the purpose of the meeting that's being convened by the Secretary.
But are Canadian officials attending?
I'm not aware whether Canadian officials are. I can get back to you on that, but I'm not at this stage intending to be there. I haven't been invited.
Last question. What did
Hegseth say about procurement when you met? Specifically, did you talk about any projects? And then also, what do you make of the U.S. Ambassador to Canada floating the idea of ending pre-clearance at airports?
Listen, I understand the ambassador from the United States from time to time can manifest a certain amount of frustration. He's doing his job and doing a good job for the United States of America. I don't know how serious that idea is, or whether it was just simply being floated. I don't know what the overall numbers are for pre-clearance through the airports where we have pre-clearance. That's a question better put to him, and frankly. In terms of the question of procurement, look, I made it very plain, and of course to Secretary Hegseth, that we have a relationship, that we continue to procure military supplies, equipment, hardware from the U.S. for ourselves and for Ukraine, but that we're diversifying. And to a certain extent, we're domesticating our production here in Canada to give rise to a new defence industrial strategy and production. So there was a very, very respectful, mutually understood conversation about the future of military hardware and supplies between both our countries.
The U.S. Ambassador has really been making a lot of comments about the F-35 review and the results of that in his public comments. What was Hegseth's position?
Listen, the F-35 review is continuing, and we'll have more to say about this in due course. But overall, the exchange on, for example, NORAD, NORAD modernization was a very positive one. We talked about how to move forward. We talked about over-the-horizon Arctic radar systems. We talked about the interconnectivity of those systems. So we're making huge progress together. We're moving very much forward together. You know, we acknowledged to each other that the last time we looked, you know, the Great Lakes are connected to both countries, and our straddling stocks go up and down both coasts, and the monarch butterfly flies north-south and south-north. We are connected. We will remain connected, and it's important to manage the relationship carefully.
But did the F-35 come up? I mean, did Secretary Hegseth?
The Secretary Hegseth is aware of the fact that the review continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then judges dropped the charges, so does that mean Kneecap's clear to come to Canada?
Well, look, any statement I've made, there's nothing more for me to add in terms of my video. Any further comment I'm going to leave to the officials, and they will, at immigration, and they will manage that accordingly.
But if the charges are dropped, there shouldn't be any reason why they couldn't come to Canada?
Yeah, look, it's better for me to leave it to to our professional public service to manage any rollout from there, but I appreciate the questions, guys. So.
On what basis did you make the video?
Pardon me?
On what basis did you make the video?
Well, I made the video based on the information that was available. But look, in terms of the actual commentary, I have nothing further to add, and any further comments, immigration officials will answer.
They've threatened to sue you. Have you received any official information?
No. Look, let me be very clear on that. I've done a lot of things in my private sector career. I have never been sued. If they want to sue me, I look forward to it. Thanks, guys.